brother was the family golden child for years while my sister was mocked and humiliated by him, but my parents called it teasing. When she got engaged, she didn't invite him to the wedding. I backed her, and now my parents are furious that I'm not defending their spoiled son. I've been thinking a lot about those years lately, the way everything was always about Landon. My name's Jonah. I'm 36 now, living in Cincinnati, Ohio. But back then, it felt like my whole life revolved around my brother's next big race. Landon was 2 years younger, a track prodigy with a closet full of medals, and the kind of smile that made my parents forget everything else. He was the golden boy, as my dad liked to call him after a few beers. And Melissa? She was 4 years younger than me, and she never stood a chance. I remember one summer afternoon, I must have been about 12, when Landon came running into the house, sweat dripping down his neck, shoes caked in dirt from the practice track. Mom rushed to meet him at the door with a cold glass of lemonade. Meanwhile, Melissa was sitting cross-legged on the living room carpet, clutching her art project like it was a piece of her heart. "Look, Mom, I made this," she said, her voice soft, but proud. Mom barely glanced at it. "That's nice, honey. But did you see how fast Landon was today? Coach says he could break the state record next season." Melissa's smile wilted in an instant. I looked at her and tried to say something, but Dad cut me off. "Jonah, grab the video camera. We need to get Landon's run on tape." It was always the same script. Landon's practice, Landon's meets, Landon's endless potential. Melissa's art, her quiet dreams, those were just background noise. And when Landon started teasing her, calling her Miss Messy because of the paint smudges on her cheeks, they laughed it off. "Oh, that's just how brothers are," Mom would say with a wink. I didn't see the humor. I tried to stick up for her once. Melissa had spent hours on a drawing, some princess with wings and a castle in the clouds. She was so proud. Landon took one look and snatched it out of her hands, crumpling it up like a candy wrapper. Melissa's lip trembled, but she didn't cry. She just looked down at her lap and picked at her fingernails. "Hey, Landon, knock it off," I said. My voice cracked a little, but I didn't back down. Dad looked up from his paper and just shook his head. "Jonah, let him be. They're just playing." I wanted to scream. Instead, I grabbed my backpack and walked out the door. That was my first real taste of how things would always be. By the time I left for college, Ohio State, a few hours away, I was done trying to fix it. Melissa was still stuck in that house, stuck in the role of the quiet sister who didn't fit the golden family narrative. I'd call her sometimes, ask how she was doing, but her answers were always the same. "Fine, Jonah. It's all fine." It wasn't fine. I knew it then, even if I didn't have the words for it. Melissa had always dreamed of studying abroad, somewhere in Italy, she told me once. But when the time came, she chose a city only 2 hours from home, a tiny college where no one knew the name, Landon. She never said why. She didn't have to. It's funny how some memories stick with you. The quiet moments, the ones where you see everything in a single glance. Like the way Mom and Dad used to beam at Landon as he sprinted around the track, the whole world cheering him on. And the way Melissa sat in the stands, clapping politely, pretending she didn't notice they were clapping for someone else. Looking back, I see it clearer than ever. Landon was their hope, their trophy. Melissa was the shadow he cast. And me? I was the one who left, but I never really escaped it. Those early years, those small cracks, that's where it all began. Melissa always knew how to find her own quiet victories. After she moved away, she rarely came back home. She ended up at a small college in Columbus, far enough to be out of reach, but still close enough that she could pretend to visit if she wanted to. She did well, got her degree in psychology, the kind of field that our parents never really took seriously. "So you're just going to listen to people talk all day?" Dad asked her once. In that patronizing tone he always used when he didn't understand something. Melissa just smiled. "Yep," she said, and left it at that. It took her a few years to settle in, but she did. She found a job she liked, working with kids who needed someone to listen. She found a small apartment with creaky floors and peeling paint, but she loved it. And then she found Nathan. The first time I met him, Melissa had invited me for dinner. I drove down from Cincinnati on a Friday evening, bringing a bottle of cheap wine because I didn't know what else to bring. Nathan answered the door. He was taller than me, quiet but warm. An architect, he told me, with that calm confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was and didn't need to prove it. The three of us sat around Melissa's tiny kitchen table, plates of pasta and laughter filling the space. Nathan reached for her hand in the middle of a story, just a small touch, but it said more than any words. I could see how she looked at him, the way her shoulders dropped when he was near, how she laughed without that edge of apology I'd grown used to hearing in her voice. After dinner, we sat on the couch, talking about everything and nothing. Nathan leaned back, listening as Melissa teased me about the time I accidentally set fire to the toaster in our old kitchen. "Oh, he's always been like this," she said, giggling, and for once, her laughter didn't sound forced. Driving back that night, I realized something. For the first time, Melissa looked like she was home. Not because of the city or the apartment, but because of him. The holidays rolled around faster than I expected. It had been years since Melissa came back for Christmas, But this year, she agreed to come for a rare holiday gathering. She wanted to see our grandfather, who was getting frail, she said. The house was exactly the same, the smell of stale coffee, the faint hum of the old furnace. Landon was there too, of course, all swagger and smugness. He had a new girlfriend on his arm, someone I barely knew. But it was the same old show, Landon holding court, Mom hanging on his every word. Melissa sat beside Nathan, fingers tangled together under the table. She looked nervous, but Nathan just gave her a small nod every now and then, like a secret signal that she wasn't alone. After dinner, Dad raised his glass for a toast. "To family," he said, looking straight at Landon. Everyone lifted their glasses. Landon smirked, lifted his glass high, then turned to Melissa. "You know, Miss Messy, I hope you don't spill this one," he said with a grin. The words were sharp, slicing through the polite laughter. Melissa's face froze. My stomach twisted. Nathan shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. "Come on, it's just a joke," Landon said, voice loud enough to make sure everyone heard. But it wasn't a joke, and everyone knew it. Before anyone else could react, Nathan stood up. Calm but steady. "You're not going to speak to her like that," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to stop the room. Landon blinked, surprised. "What? It's just a joke." Nathan's expression didn't change. "Try it again, and we're leaving. And if you ever put your hands on her, I'll make sure you regret it." The room went dead quiet. Even Dad looked away, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Landon's smile faltered. He put his glass down a little too hard, muttering something under his breath. Melissa reached for Nathan's hand, her fingers wrapping around his like a lifeline. I saw her shoulders straighten a bit, like she'd finally found someone willing to stand up when the rest of us had stayed quiet for too long. The rest of the night was a blur. Small talk, tense silences. But I kept stealing glances at Nathan and Melissa. For the first time, she didn't look small. She looked safe. As I drove back to my apartment later that night, I kept thinking about that moment. How Nathan didn't shout or curse. How he didn't let Landon's nonsense slide. How he saw what I'd seen my whole life. The small cuts that add up until you're bleeding out. Melissa had always been invisible in that house. But not anymore. Nathan made sure of that. And I knew then that this wasn't going to be like all the other holidays. Something had shifted. Something real. Melissa called me a few weeks later, her voice steady, but her words deliberate. "Jonah, we're getting married," she said. I almost dropped the phone. "That's amazing," I said, leaning back in my chair at the coffee shop where I was working. "When's the big day?" "We're thinking early fall," she said, and I could hear her smile through the phone. "But there's something else. We're not inviting Landon." I paused, letting her words settle. "Good," I said finally. "I'll back you up on this." She let out a breath I didn't even realize she'd been holding. "Mom and Dad are already losing their minds. But I just can't have him there." "Jonah, I get it," I said. "You deserve to feel safe on your own wedding day." A week later, I found myself in my parents' living room, sitting on the same old couch I used to sprawl on as a kid. Mom was pacing, her face flushed and her eyes narrowed like she was searching for a target. "Your sister is tearing this family apart," she said, her voice tight. "She's being selfish, Jonah. Family is family." "Mom," I cut in, my voice calm. "He's not going to her wedding. That's final." Dad was slumped in his recliner, arms crossed, eyes hard. "You're siding with her over your own brother?" I felt my jaw tighten. "I'm siding with what's right," I said. "Landon's had his run of this family for years. This is Melissa's day. She doesn't owe him anything." Mom's lips pinched. "Your grandfather won't stand for this. He's always believed in family unity." "Grandpa's walking her down the aisle," I said, letting that sink in. "He knows exactly what Landon put her through. He wants her to be happy." Silence. Dad shifted in his chair, looking away like the living room ceiling suddenly needed his attention. "Listen to yourself," Mom said finally, her voice low. "You're encouraging her to break up the family. She's your sister. You should be convincing her to forgive, to move on." I took a deep breath, feeling something in me crack open. "I did that for years, Mom. I watched you and Dad let Landon do whatever he wanted. I watched you laugh off every cruel thing he said to Melissa. You called it brotherly teasing. You called it love." Her face paled. "That's not fair." "No," I said, standing up. "What's not fair is pretending Melissa has to carry that weight forever just because you don't want to face what you did. You raised a man who doesn't know how to treat his own sister, and now you're mad because she's finally saying no." Dad's jaw worked like he wanted to speak, but nothing came out. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Melissa's not the one breaking up the family. Landon is. And you two let him get away with it for decades." Mom blinked, like she couldn't believe I was saying these things out loud. Maybe it was the first time anyone had. I turned for the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. "I'm done pretending Landon's a golden boy," I said, pausing with my hand on the doorframe. "He's a grown man who can't take responsibility for his own life, and I won't have my kids around him either, if you're wondering." Dad looked up sharply. "You'd keep your children from their uncle?" "I'd keep them safe," I said. "I won't let them think it's normal to be treated like Melissa was." The room fell silent, the air heavy with the weight of truths we'd all been too scared to say for years. "I hope one day you see what this did to her," I said quietly. "And to me." Then I walked out, the cold autumn air biting at my face, but feeling clearer than I had in years. Word traveled fast, the way it always does in families. A week after my confrontation with Mom and Dad, I started getting messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. "Jonah, are you sure this is the right thing? It's not like Landon murdered anyone. You're hurting your mother, you know. I read them all in silence, sitting in my car outside the grocery store. Funny how people who never asked me how I was doing for years suddenly cared when the family drama was too loud to ignore. Melissa and I talked every day, even if it was just a quick check-in. She was holding up, though I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. I knew they'd turn on me, she said one night, her voice calm. I just didn't think they'd do it this fast. I squeezed my phone tighter. Let them. We're not going back to how it was. Not everyone was against us, though. Grandpa called me out of the blue, his voice crackling over the line. I'm proud of you, Jonah, he said. And Melissa. She's always deserved better. Thanks, Grandpa, I said, feeling my throat tighten. He'd always been the one person in that family who saw through the noise. Grandma, though, she called me crying. I don't understand why you're doing this, she said, her voice shaking. Your mother can't sleep. She says you've destroyed her family. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead to the steering wheel. I'm sorry, Grandma, I said, but the family was already broken. We're just done pretending it's not. The messages kept coming, filling my inbox like static. Some were sympathetic, some were biting. I stopped responding altogether. Let them wonder. Let them fill the silence with their own guilty thoughts. Melissa and I decided to be blunt. I sent a message to the extended family group chat, the one where people usually shared baby pictures and holiday plans. If any of you think Melissa is the problem, feel free to take care of Landon yourselves. Because we're done. We're not coming back. No more birthdays, no more holidays, no more pretending. I put my phone down and felt relief, like finally saying out loud the thing I'd been whispering to myself for years. Of course, that didn't stop the calls. My cousin Jenna called me the next day, her voice low and careful. I'm sorry, Jonah. I know you've been carrying this for a long time. I wish I'd said something sooner. Thanks, I said, and I meant it. But I also knew she'd never have said anything if I hadn't gone first. Mom didn't call. Neither did Dad. The silence from them was its own message, louder than any words. I started to realize something as the days passed. This wasn't just about Melissa. This was about me too. About how I'd spent my whole life making excuses for Landon, for our parents, for anyone who treated us like afterthoughts. Melissa and I had always been the quiet ones. The ones who let Landon's drama fill every room, every conversation. But not anymore. This time, I wasn't backing down. And for the first time, neither was she. A few weeks later, I found myself back at work. It was a part-time retail gig at a men's clothing store in downtown Cincinnati, the kind of place that smelled like cedar and had floor-to-ceiling mirrors in every corner. I'd started the job a few years back, mostly to pay off some old student loans. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept me busy. We had a group chat, all of us staff, and the assistant manager, a guy named Drew who thought he was the next big influencer. He'd post selfies from the store mirror like it was his personal runway. I never really paid attention to the group. It was mostly memes and bad jokes. But one morning, everything changed. I was on my lunch break, scrolling through my phone when I noticed I'd been left out of a new group chat. The Real Rankings, someone had named it. I had to see it, so I asked my friend Chelsea, who worked the same shift as me. It's nothing, she said quickly, her eyes darting away. Chelsea, I said, my voice low. Come on, she sighed, pulling her phone out. They ranked the guys at the store. Like, who's the hottest? She showed me the screen, her fingers hovering like she wanted to hide it. My name wasn't on it, not even at the bottom. But there was Greg, the delivery guy who only came in once a week. And Drew, of course, with his carefully styled hair. Even Mason, who never smiled at anyone. But not me. I stared at it, something cold settling in my chest. So, I'm not even on the list, I said finally, my voice flat. It's stupid, Chelsea said. Don't let it get to you. You're sweet, Jonah. Everyone knows that. Sweet. That word felt like a slap. Sweet meant invisible. Sweet meant not enough. I didn't say anything else. I just nodded and went back to folding shirts, my mind somewhere else. The rest of the day felt like I was underwater. Everything sounded distant. Every smile felt forced. I skipped my next shift. I didn't call in. Just didn't show up. I sat at home in my tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun in slow circles. My phone buzzed with messages. Drew, wondering where I was. Chelsea, asking if I was okay. I didn't answer. I just lay there, the hum of the fan filling the silence. I kept thinking about how easily I'd been erased. How I wasn't even worth a spot on a stupid list of who was hot at a job I didn't even care about. And it hurt more than it should have. It wasn't about the ranking. It wasn't about the job. It was about that feeling, the same one I'd felt in our parents' living room, watching them light up for Landon while Melissa and I sat in the shadows. The same feeling I'd spent years trying to shake. At work, the girls tried to make it up to me. Jonah, you're so nice, they said, like it was supposed to fix everything. But all I heard was, you're not important. You're not even worth noticing. I realized, in that quiet, suffocating apartment, that this wasn't just about Melissa. It was about me. About how I'd let everyone, family, coworkers, strangers, decide I wasn't enough. For once, I let myself feel it. The anger, the sadness, the stupid, petty shame. And then I decided, I wasn't going to let this be my story. A few days later, Carl, the store owner, pulled me aside. Carl was in his 50s, a big guy with kind eyes and a way of speaking that made you feel like he'd been in your corner your whole life. Jonah, can we chat in the back? He said, and I nodded, my stomach in knots. He closed the office door behind us, the hum of the store's music fading into the background. I heard about what happened, he said gently. The group chat. I swallowed hard. It's fine, I said quickly, staring at the floor. I don't want to make a big deal out of it. He leaned back against the desk, crossing his arms. But it is a big deal. It's not just some harmless joke. It's humiliating, and it's not how we treat people here. I felt a flicker of relief, but also a rush of shame that he even had to say it out loud. I'm sorry, I missed my shift, I mumbled. He waved a hand. I'm not worried about the missed shift. I'm worried about you. Jonah, you've been one of the most dependable people here since day one. You don't deserve to be treated like you're invisible. I blinked hard, not sure what to say. He sighed. I suspended Drew for a week, he said, his voice firm. And I'm offering you some paid time off, not as punishment for you, as a chance to take care of yourself. You've earned it. My eyes stung with tears I didn't want to let fall. Thanks, Carl, I said, my voice small. He nodded. There's also this, he said, reaching for a folded piece of paper on his desk. He handed it to me, and I unfolded it slowly. It was a handwritten note from the girls in the store, the same ones who'd left me out of that stupid ranking. Jonah, we're really sorry. We didn't realize how much it hurt. We think you're cute and funny, and we're so glad you work here. Please don't quit. I read it twice, my throat tight. The words were kind, but they didn't erase the sting. Not really. Carl watched me carefully. You don't have to forgive them right away, or ever, he said. But don't let this define you. You're more than how they see you. I nodded, folding the note and slipping it into my pocket. I know, I said, and for the first time, I really meant it. On the bus ride home, I sat in the back and stared out the window. The city rolled by in streaks of gray and gold. I thought about how I'd spent so much of my life trying to be seen by my parents, by the family, by everyone else, and how even now, at a dead-end retail job, it still hurt when I was invisible. But Carl was right. It wasn't about hotness or group chats. It was about something deeper, that feeling that I didn't matter, that no one would notice if I disappeared. I pulled the note from my pocket and read it again. Cute, funny, liked. It was sweet, but it didn't fix everything. Because deep down, I knew the real problem wasn't them. It was me, and the stories I'd been telling myself for years. Maybe it was time to start rewriting them. A few weeks later, I found myself sitting in a small office with bright white walls, a clipboard in my hands, and a woman named Dr. Patel across from me. Why are you here today, Jonah? She asked gently. I took a breath. I guess. I want to stop feeling like I'm always in the background, I said. My voice felt small in the room. She nodded, scribbling something down. Tell me more about that. So I did. About the way I'd always felt second to Landon, the way my parents only seemed to see me when I was useful, the way I'd let people like Drew and the girls at the store decide I wasn't worth noticing, about how tired I was of feeling like the invisible man in every room I entered. Dr. Patel didn't tell me I was overreacting. She didn't tell me to toughen up. She just listened, nodding. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was actually hearing me. After that first session, Melissa called. How was it? She asked. Good, I said. Scary, but good. She laughed softly. That's how it starts. Melissa also suggested I start lifting weights. Not because you need to impress anyone, she said. Because it'll help you feel strong. It helped me. So I signed up at a small gym a couple blocks from my apartment. The first time I walked in, I felt like I was 12 again, all nerves and self-doubt. But I picked up a barbell, and slowly, the more I lifted, the more the noise in my head went quiet. I wasn't trying to turn into a bodybuilder. I just wanted to feel like I had some control over my life, like I was taking up space on purpose for once. I also started paying more attention to how I dressed. It wasn't about looking hot or trendy. It was about feeling like I actually deserved to be seen. I bought a few new shirts that fit better, threw out the ratty hoodies that had become my armor. I'd stand in front of the mirror some mornings, still half asleep, and study the reflection. My arms looked a little stronger, my posture a little straighter. Nothing dramatic, but enough to remind me that change was possible. I realized that I wasn't doing any of this for anyone else. Not for the girls at work, not for Landon or my parents. It was for me. A way of saying, I'm here, I exist, and I'm not going to let you erase me. As I got stronger on the outside, I started noticing the old patterns in my head. The way I'd catch myself apologizing for everything. The way I'd downplay my own feelings to keep the peace. Dr. Patel called it fawning. A word that sounded small, but felt like my whole life in a nutshell. I think I'm done with that, I told her one session. I don't want to be the quiet one anymore. The one who just takes it. She smiled. That's good, she said. That's growth. By early summer, I decided to quit the store. I gave Carl 2 weeks' notice. Thanked him for everything. You're going to be missed around here, Jonah, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. But I'm proud of you. I left the store feeling light, like I'd finally taken off a jacket I'd been wearing for too many seasons. I'd landed a summer internship at a small marketing firm. Nothing fancy, just a chance to try something new. Something that didn't feel like an extension of my old self. Melissa and I talked every night. I'm proud of you, she said once, her voice thick with emotion. You're not just surviving anymore. You're living. I still had my bad days. Days where I'd catch myself shrinking into the corners of rooms, where I'd hear Landon's voice in my head, telling me I wasn't enough. But each time I'd pause, take a breath, and remind myself that he didn't get to decide who I was anymore. For the first time in my life, I was learning that the only approval I needed was my own. A few weeks after I quit the store, I found myself pulling up to my parents' house. The same driveway I used to shovel as a kid, the same faded welcome mat on the porch. I'd called ahead. "We need to talk," I'd said, and Mom had sounded wary but agreed. Dad opened the door. He looked older than I remembered, lines on his face I'd never noticed before. "Jonah," he said stiffly, "come in." I stepped inside, the familiar smell of old coffee and lemon-scented furniture polish washing over me. Mom was already at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug like it was the only thing keeping her steady. I sat down across from them, my heart thudding in my chest. "I'm going to make this simple," I said, my voice calm. "I'm not here to fight, but I need you both to hear me." They watched me, silent. "I've decided to go low contact," I said. "That means I'll see you at family events, birthdays, holidays, but that's it. No more dropping by, no more check-ins. I need space." Mom's lips parted in surprise. "Jonah, you don't mean that." "I do," I said quietly. "I need it for me, for my own peace of mind." Dad's jaw tightened. "This is because of Landon." "It's because of everything," I said. "Because I can't keep pretending we're a normal family when you let him treat Melissa like she didn't matter. And you let it happen to me, too." Silence. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of the years pressing down on me. "I need to know one thing," I said. "When you're gone, what's your plan for Landon?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. Mom's eyes dropped to her coffee cup. "You spent your whole lives covering for him," I said, "propping him up like he's still that track star you were so proud of. But he's a grown man now. When you're gone, what happens?" Dad said nothing. Mom looked up at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for the right words. Their silence was my answer. They didn't have a plan. They just expected someone, probably me, to pick up where they left off. I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "I'm not going to be that person," I said. "I will not take care of him. Not emotionally. Not financially. Not ever. He's not my responsibility." Dad's shoulders slumped. For the first time, he looked small. "I know you think I'm being cruel," I said, softer now. "But this isn't about cruelty. It's about survival. It's about finally saying no to something I never agreed to." Mom's eyes glistened with tears. "But he's your brother," she whispered. "He's not my child," I said, my own voice cracking. "And I'm done being the one who fixes everything for everyone else." I stood, pushing my chair back. "I'll see you at Thanksgiving," I said. "But that's it." Dad didn't look at me. Mom reached out like she wanted to stop me, but her hand fell short. I walked out of that house feeling lighter, like I'd finally cut the last thread tying me to a story that never really belonged to me. In the car, I sat for a long moment, breathing in the silence. No phone ringing, no guilt weighing me down. For the first time, I felt like my life was my own. The morning of the wedding, I drove down to Columbus, the city where Melissa had found her peace. It was early, the sun just coming up over the skyline, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. My hands were steady on the wheel, my thoughts clearer than they'd been in a long time. Melissa was waiting at her small apartment when I arrived, a soft smile on her face. She wore a white silk robe, her hair pinned up in soft curls. She looked calm, radiant, like someone who'd finally stopped waiting for permission to be happy. "You ready?" I asked, my voice low. She nodded. "More than ready," she said. Her eyes shimmered, but there were no tears, only resolve. Nathan's family had offered to host the wedding in their garden, a beautiful, intimate space that felt more like home than any place we'd ever known. There were fairy lights strung between the trees, wildflowers in old mason jars, and a long table set for close friends and family. Our parents weren't there. Neither was Landon. The weight of their absence felt heavy at first, but then it felt like a blessing, like a quiet, final goodbye to everything that used to hold us back. I watched Melissa move through the small crowd, hugging Nathan's mom, laughing with her best friend from college. She looked like someone who had been set free. The ceremony was simple and honest. Grandpa walked her down the aisle, his step slow but sure. She held his arm tightly, her face glowing. I stood near the back, my hands clasped in front of me, a proud smile on my lips. Nathan waited for her at the altar, his eyes locked on hers like there was no one else in the world. When they reached each other, Melissa let out a breath I didn't even realize she'd been holding. "Who gives this woman away?" the officiant asked. "I do," Grandpa said softly, his voice thick with emotion. The vows were quiet, sincere. Nathan spoke first, his voice steady. "I promise to build a life with you that is ours, not perfect, not always easy, but always real." Melissa's voice shook just a little. "I promise to keep choosing you, every day, in small ways and big ones. To believe in us, even when it's hard." I blinked back tears as they slipped rings onto each other's fingers. When they kissed, there was no big cheer, no over-the-top applause. Just a quiet sigh from the crowd, like we were all letting go of something heavy. At the reception, Melissa pulled me aside. We stood near the edge of the garden, the laughter of her friends floating through the warm air. "You know you made this possible, right?" she said, her hand on my arm. "You helped me believe I deserved better." I shook my head. "No, Mel, you did that yourself." She smiled, her eyes soft. "Maybe, but it helped to have someone who always saw me, even when no one else did." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. The kind of hug that said all the things we'd been too scared to say for years. As the night wound down, I watched Melissa and Nathan dance under the lights, her laughter carrying across the garden, and I realized something I hadn't dared to believe before. This was the end of the old story. The cycle of cruelty, of favoritism, of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. It stopped here. Melissa had built something new, and so had I. Later, when I got in my car to head home, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I felt free. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing someone else's idea of family. I was part of one that we'd built ourselves, out of truth and kindness and the courage to finally say, enough.